I would like all of you to picture the oldest photograph of a human you believe exists. What would they look like? What would their occupation be, and why would they be in the photo? Perhaps you are thinking of a ruler, a king, or a president, somebody important, somebody influential. But in reality, the first photo of a human ever recorded was in 1883 on the streets of Paris. Now, this photo had an exposure time of about 7 minutes, so the only person actually in the image and not blurred due to their movement was a shoe shiner. Now, we will never know who this individual was, what his life was like, or truly anything about him. He was most likely entirely average. And despite this, he is remembered. So this brings me to the broader question I would like all of you to consider during my speech. Why are some people remembered and others seem to disappear from history? Hi, my name is Spencer, and today I'm going to be speaking about the inherent need to be remembered. So let's take a step back. Humans have always had this fascination with leaving a mark and remaining in public memory. Before artifacts, before pictures, and before paintings, humans were already trying to say one simple thing: we were here. Even the earliest evidence of human existence, the cave painting, is trying to state that very thing. Humans have always had this desire, a hope to commemorate our legacy. However, we have shifted from looking at memory collectively to looking at it individually. The seeds of individualism began to be planted in ancient Greece before expanding with the rise of Christianity and the idea that you could have a personal relationship with God. This was firmly supplanted in the Enlightenment period. Even if you think of the Industrial Revolution, think of all of the items and all of the inventions that are named after one person in particular, when in reality, there were hundreds of scientists and inventors working on their creation. Even bloomers. A female undergarment is named after Amelia Bloomer, or McGill University is named after a particular person. But despite all of this, humans have always been confronted with one very uncomfortable truth. We are inherently temporary. So legacy becomes our way to mediate this fact. But legacy has always been dictated by power. And I want you to think of who historically has had the privilege to be remembered. And it has almost always been something afforded to the wealthy and the influential. In the Napoleonic Wars, you don't think of the poor foot soldiers. You think of Napoleon himself, commanding an entire army. Or in the Protestant Reformation, you don't think of the thousands of German peasants who advocated and passed out pamphlets. You think of Martin Luther and his 95 theses. Serfs and peasants were too ordinary for our historical standards, and so they were forgotten, and thus begun the close association between power and memory. However, in the modern day and age, that association is dissolving. We have entered an age of mass accessibility, and most people around the globe have access to the internet if they wish. They are free to post social media content and are free to connect with others across the globe. So, theoretically, we should be remembering more than ever. However, we are producing more content and more media than ever before, more photos, more videos, and yet we are forgetting just so very fast. Nobody remembers what trend occurred a few months ago, and fame is over almost as quickly as it has begun. Collective memory is depleting at an astounding rate. And thus begins a new issue. Instead of trying to live, we are trying to get attention and trying to get people to notice us. Attention has become the new form of currency. So just to sum it up for you, we have gone from who are we to now who am I to currently who is my avatar and who am I trying to represent. We are trying to appeal to the public. And now a new thing enters the picture: branding. In short, branding is the way that a company or a business controls public perception. And it goes far beyond just a simplistic logo. Every action, every color palette, and every endorsement are fueled by the desire to fit within the specific parameters set out for us by a brand. Just think of Starbucks. They have cultivated a third space persona in which a warm ambiance and accessible seating has become the name of the game and what gets people to buy into their brand. But now we're seeing something much more detrimental begin to occur. Humans have become the new mechanism for which branding happens. We are actively watching as our generation goes from people into products. Now you aren't able to think of yourself even as an individual. You can't ask yourself, who am I? But instead, who do people see me as? Who is my brand? What is my brand? But the problem is, when everything becomes a brand, it also becomes a performance. But despite all of this, I keep returning to that Parisian on the street. He happened to be at the right place at the right time to be remembered. Not influential, not powerful, not even wealthy. And despite this, he is remembered. He reminds us that you don't need to be extraordinary to be remembered. And begs us to ask this next question. Do we have to be remembered in order to be meaningful? And why do we care so much about remaining in public memory? We are so willing to give up our authenticity in order to be remembered as a fake persona of ourselves. Behind every calculated motive and every action staged for visibility, we are left with that very truth. So maybe, instead of being seen by millions of strangers, we should aim to be meaningful to those close to us. Or maybe the goal should be to create something meaningful without the promise that we will ever be remembered for it. Because beauty is not undermined by impermanence. So I want to return to that man in the photograph. We will never know his story, his identity, or truly anything about him. We will never know if he loved or if he was loved. He simply existed in a time in which we decided to remember and keep him. And we have to ask ourselves, does my life have to be remembered? Do I have to leave a legacy in order to be happy, in order to be meaningful? And then we can look at the bigger picture. Too often, we create images and personas for ourselves in the hopes that they will outlast us. However, in this process, something is lost. We lose sight of the memories that belong to us, not the rest of the world, just us. We don't need to create something. We don't need to be remembered for it. Instead, why can't we live with purpose and meaning without this promise, without this facade? And then the question becomes, how do I want to live while I am here? Not as a product, not as a brand, but simply as a human. And then your truth becomes that you do not need to make your life immortal in order to make it important. You simply have to be present while you are here. And I think that is truly what continues to make humans human, despite technological advancement, despite political change. And that is truly and innately a beautiful thing. Thank you.